Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Cosmic Owl Astrology. I am Louise Eddington, and I am delighted today to have with me Della KZ. And Della, I watched a presentation that Della did for OPA. Most of you know that I'm an OPA peer group leader and mentor, and so I've been a long time OPA mentor. And Della was presenting on a topic that is really dear to my heart because I wrote a book in 2020 that's actually a bestseller, The Complete Guide to Astrology. And I was asked to write this from a non binary perspective by a lesbian editor because most astrology books are written from a very binary perspective. It's kind of funny because I re-listened to a book that I first read in 1989. I listened to it on Audible, and all I could hear was he. It's like, yeah. Anyway, and that was of its time. It's still a good book, but and I've done some presentations since that kind of met crickets a lot of the time. Of trying to say, well, astrology is a language. We can use different language. Please, can we use different language? And finally, somebody else is presenting on it as well. So, Della, would you tell people about yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Della. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a second generation queer astrologer, so I grew up very much surrounded by astrology. And I've been practicing very seriously for about 5 years. Probably started around when your book came out, actually. Um, and I mostly do consulting astrology, and I teach. And my one of my primary focuses is queering astrology, specifically through the language that we use.
Mm, cool. Awesome. So it's readings by Della, your website, right?
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
So if anybody, I'll put that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to contact Della, they can. So I'd really like you to get the ball rolling and talk a little bit. Obviously, we're not going to do the slideshow and things like that, but just a little bit about the context and content of your presentation. But the first thing I would like to say before anybody thinks about anything is that the literal word astrology means the language of the stars. So astrology is a language. So let's lead off with that.
It is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm,
Um, so the context of my presentation, which is also often the context of the teaching that I do, starts in many different places, many thousands of years ago, with the idea that there has never been a static understanding of gender. Gender has always shifted and changed depending on where you lived and what time you lived in. So many cultures around the world, currently and historically, had three, four, five, six, seven genders that were recognized and distinct. And it really wasn't until um, the rise of global white supremacy and Western colonization of many different indigenous peoples that the idea of binary gender became more ubiquitous. And it's definitely not still ubiquitous everywhere, um, but it became what it is now.
mm,
So I think that that context is important because depending on what you consider astrology to be, the practice of using the stars as a language is tens of thousands of years old
mm,
and has existed all over the world in many different times, um, in communities that did not have binary understandings of gender.
mhm,
And I think that that is an important context to use to set the stage.
mm,
Because what I propose is that um, the binary understanding of gender is very limiting in all ways, but especially for astrology. And one of the things I focused on in my presentation is the ways in which the terms masculine and feminine have become really shortcuts to imply things that we're not really saying out loud.
Oh,
So we might say the moon is feminine, and what we mean is that the moon is nurturing, but we're saying feminine and expecting that people will understand what that means, which first of all is bad communication, I think, and second of all reinforces the gender binary and patriarchy, which have been literally detrimental to millions of people throughout the world.
mm-hmm.
So I am also very interested in the specificity of language that we use in general in astrology, but in many parts of my life. And so I would much rather somebody say exactly the qualities that they are describing about a planet or a sign or a house, as opposed to saying masculine and feminine and expecting that everyone will kind of understand what that means.
Mm, I'm in complete agreement. Now, in my book, I actually introduced the language of the astrology of sect, which is a very ancient technique that uses night and day instead. But I can even see
Mhm.
how that could be problematic as well. But day is kind of we're up and more out and doing things, so it's that
Mhm.
energy of action. Whereas night is receptive and quiet and inward.
Mhm.
So it worked better for me.
Yeah.
But to talk about the specific, I can't say the word today, of language, the words feminine and masculine themselves, if you look up their etymology, even in the culture we live under, did not come into play until the mid 14th century.
Which lines up with some major colonization.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
it
that makes sense.
yeah it does.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to your point about night and day,
Mm.
I find much less, I take much less of an issue with that language because it isn't attached inherently to um gendered stereotypes about people.
Mm.
And the terms masculine and feminine very much are and have been
Oh,
for 700 years. And
they
so I think when you're using language that maybe it has gendered implications in astrology, but not in the larger world, not when you're talking to clients, things like that.
and so well, I kind of became well. I've always been an activist anyway for any kind of equality and for people to be who they are. But in my early life with astrology, if any astrologer ever looked at my chart, they always told me I've got a very masculine chart, and I'm just like, what does that mean? You know.
It's meaningless.
It's totally meaningless. But also, it could be the chart of a table when it was made, an event, an explosion, or I don't know, a horse.
Creation of a state.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I have actually had one astrologer tell me he thought he had read somewhere that you could tell gender from the chart, and you just can't. I challenged him to come back to me and show me, and he never did. So
I mean, it's nonsense because
it's total nonsense.
people, hundreds of people are born at the same moment, of every moment.
Actually, absolutely, yeah. And so, you know, I come from it from both the political perspective, and you're as a non-binary person, then you're clearly been more engrossed in that than even I have. But also it's the language thing, as I said, it's so not specific, and it is implying things. But going back to the being political, all my bad reviews on Amazon for this book are saying that I brought my political agenda into it, which I don't care. I'm fine with that, but
Mhm.
absolutely I don't care. But you know, what do you say to people that accuse you and I of that? Because, like, for example, um, intersex people, they're what, over 2% of the population. That's
Mhm.
an enormous number of people, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Millions of people.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. I mean, I think that what I think about is what Black feminists thinkers have been saying for decades, which is that the personal is political.
Mm.
Everything is political. There is nothing that isn't political when you live in the United States,
Or
especially.
in the world.
And yeah, there's nothing in, I mean, yeah, I would argue in the
Yeah.
world, but
Hmm.
there is certainly here, there is nothing that isn't political. And
Hmm.
so bringing in a heavily gendered perspective to astrology is also political. It's just a different political choice.
It is.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I don't care. I think everybody brings their politics into everything, and it's impossible to avoid, and it's also like can be a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't personally have people telling me that because I think that I just overwhelmingly draw queer people. And
Yeah.
so I haven't run into that quite as much,
Well,
but
I don't run into it, on a daily basis in my
just
work.
on
It's
Amazon.
only on Amazon reviews
Right.
where, so they don't know
Yeah.
me, but so,
Yeah.
and I don't, I'm overtly political in all my work anyway, because
Yeah.
I figure you might not want to work with me if you don't like my
Good to know up front.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
And oh, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say to your point about intersex people, like intersex and trans and non-binary people exist.
Mm-hmm.
And to say that bringing in those perspectives is political is in some way denying the reality that we exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what makes our existence inherently political because other people, cis people, think it's inherently political. And so it becomes
Yeah.
inherently political.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's like saying like a lot of astrologers will talk about the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, the American and French Revolution. But I think actually much more significantly, it was the Haitian Revolution. And I'm sure there are many people who would tell me that I'm being political for saying that, as if it's not political to talk about two revolutions without leaving out potentially the most like course changing revolution that we've had in the last 1,000 years, you know?
I'm ashamed to say I don't know a huge amount about that one, but I wasn't born in the US anyway, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It was a major slave rebellion. It was the first free
Okay.
black republic established in the world.
Well, my Gemini moon's gonna be going and
I'm gonna
reading
go look that up.
about that in a
Yeah.
minute. Right after we get off, probably. But so, Della, how do you think people like you, me, astrologers who really would like to see the world of astrology change and just be more mindful and aware? That's all I'm asking personally, actually. It's like, say, when I get a booking, I have an intake form. I always ask the pronouns because at least that gives me some idea of where the person is coming from, right?
Hmm.
Otherwise, you have no idea who the person is that you're connecting with, and you can't tell that from just looking at the chart, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So how can we change this?
Yeah. I mean, I am a huge advocate for asking people's pronouns on intake forms. I also do that. I think that's really important.
Mm,
Um, because it gives you, I mean, obviously in most readings you're not going to be talking about the client in third person to the client, but
no.
it does give you information like if they're talking about their parents, you can talk about them as a daughter or a son or a child or, it gives you some access to more correct information.
Mhm,
Uh, but my biggest thing is like when we take away gendered terms in astrology, which include masculine and feminine, but also include things like the moon is the mother, Saturn is the father. Uh,
mhm. When
w-
Saturn rules a yin sign or a night
that's
sign
and
or
that is what
whatever. Yeah.
that's part of
Yeah.
what's nonsense to me is I'm
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you're not even being consistent about it.
Yeah.
But but yeah, I mean, I think that that really allows for much better readings. It, first of all, like beyond the readings, it allows for people to feel more comfortable opening up. If
Mhm,
somebody comes into a reading with me as the astrologer and I'm the client and they said to me, well, like you have Saturn conjunct your moon, and so maybe that was XYZ relationship with your father. I would just tune out the rest of what they said because I don't have a dad. I have two moms.
mhm.
And So I think it prevents clients shutting down.
Mm,
And second of all, it allows for that more precise language and communicating exactly what you mean to the client. And
mm,
I mean, even something like saying the moon is nurturing, I think is a little bit vague, but it's certainly less vague than the moon is feminine,
oh,
um,
well.
which is yeah, one of my least favorite ones. But I think that the third thing that is really important um, to to understand is that, which I haven't said explicitly, I've sort of said implicitly in this conversation, is that for somebody who does not identify at all with masculinity, who
Mm,
potentially was socialized as a boy and is now a trans woman or trans femme, being told that they have, for example, a masculine chart could be incredibly harmful. And
mm,
so this is people's actual lives that we're talking about. This isn't just like a meta conversation about language. This is people's actual lives and their ability to access astrology or not.
yeah, I totally agree. It really is. And I think as astrologers, when we meet people, we have to be really mindful of what language we use. It's clear that there are uh, parts of the chart that refer to the parenting that somebody received or the nurturing.
Of course.
I usually kind of try and say which parent was the most disciplined,
Mhm.
or something like that,
Yeah, me too.
avoiding saying, was your dad the heavy-handed one or something?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's just important because families are very different now. Well, they always have been, but they just were more
Mhm.
hidden away. And
Mhm.
and obviously now, I think the world of astrology, with the world that we're in at the moment, could be part of the healing that is needed,
Yes.
rather than upholding what
Yes.
these people are trying to cling onto with their fingernails, let's say.
Yes. And that's part of what I um have taught since I started teaching about queer astrology and queering astrology is that there has been, and this is something that I'm so embedded in queer community. I actually don't know if straight people know this about astrology, but queer people like know a fair amount about astrology sort of inherently. It's just like part of the community talking about astrology. Everybody knows their sun, moon, and rising at the very least. Um,
Mhm.
and
I know that, but I've hung
yeah,
with a lot of queer
I
community.
think a lot of people know
You
that,
know,
but
yeah.
I'm sometimes I'm like I'm in the boiling water, so it's hard to say.
Oh no, no, I get it. Oh, I'm sure there's a lot that would have no idea, to be quite.
Yeah, I think so. But
Mm,
um I think that that is actually for a very specific reason, which there's a great quote that I always read by Channy Nicholas that I don't have in front of me, where she talks about how queers have always taken to astrology because it's a way of seeing ourselves reflected in
mm,
in a greater sense, in a spiritual sense, in a universal sense that we don't get from mainstream religious communities for the most part, that we don't get from even like some other kinds of new age practices.
mm,
I think that you're right that astrology, as we like witness the rise of fascism in the US and globally, astrology is kind of at this precipice where it could tip into siding with fascism, which would be very easy, or it could become something much more radical and much more healing.
I think it did in Nazi Germany, didn't it?
Tip into
Into
fascism.
fascism.
I think it did too.
Yeah, I believe so. But I'm on a bit of a mission to create it more as a healing quantum tool. I actually ran a call series called the Quantum Astrology Conference, and or gathering, I called it. Yeah, I preferred that to conference. and we are in this quantum world. Everything's connected. We are all, you know. So for the not real astrologers listening, your your chart is a map of your soul, basically, and you are every part of that. whether your Mars is a sensitive Mars or an aggressive Mars, or for example, or whatever, in your chart, you are every part of it. And I think that's perhaps why the queer community can see themselves reflected more in it, because there's all those parts,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Mm-hmm.
if you're
Yeah,
especially if you're non-binary or whatever.
totally.
Yeah. Hmm.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm.
because of that, it's important for those parts to not be gendered.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know why they said I'd got a masculine chart. I got a massive Sagittarius stellium, with
So do I.
I know, but it's in the 12th house, so I'm very, yeah, I know. Anyway, it's the whole chart.
Mm-hmm.
We are the whole chart. We are everything, every part of it, every piece of it. And I'm really pleased that I like study everything because I'm one of those people. But modern therapies, like internal family systems or parts
Yep.
work, are reflecting that as well.
Yep.
I went to internal family systems therapist for a while, and we went over everything, and I was like, "That's astrology." So,
It really is. I've had that thought too. I would love if there was more. I'm sure somewhere somebody is doing this or thinking about it. I'd love an IFS astrology crossover.
hmm well, my therapist kind of was. She understood the basics, at least, of
That's cool.
astrology. So, yeah, maybe you and I will team up and do something, or
That would be cool.
gather in people and do something. So
Hmm.
there's Cheney Nichols. She's another great astrologer who
Hmm.
addresses these kind of topics,
Hmm.
and I felt quite on my own, to be quite honest, though, when I wrote this book. So you're more in. I mean, I'm now been married with my man for 30 years. So
Hmm.
even though I may have played a little bit when I was younger, shall we say.
Hmm.
But now I clearly do not go out and just go into gay bars, because I don't go out to gay bars or bars.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, what other astrologers are there out there? I know there is a queer astrology conference every year, I think.
There is, or sometimes it's every other year.
Okay.
There's the Queer Astrology Conference. There's a brilliant astrologer named Naimonu James. There's an
Mm.
astrologer, Jessica Lanyadoo, uh,
Oh, yeah. She's
who
great.
does Ghost of a Podcast is the name of her
Yeah.
podcast.
Mm.
There's Alice Sparkley Cat, who wrote the book Post-Colonial Astrology.
I have
Um,
that book. It's very good.
yeah, yeah. And I also love Alice Sparkley Cat. Um, I love their Instagram posts, and like that amount of information feels like really digestible, and it's very um profound and meaningful.
Mm.
Um, yeah, those are some of the ones that come to mind, but I mean there's so many. Like there are there's somebody named Dana Knuckles, who runs the People's Oracle, who does sidereal astrology. Um,
Okay.
I just heard about a queer Chinese astrologer whose name I can't remember either. But yeah, there's even outside of Western astrology, which is most of what I know, there's definitely other queer astrologers.
Rising up. Good. Good to
Hmm.
hear.
Hmm.
And how could I support you moving forward, really, with this? Or how could we, as the astrology community, and people that aren't astrologers but just like to watch podcasts like this and read
Yeah.
the books, you know?
I think that the biggest thing is being willing to shift your language
Mm,
and being willing to have conversations with other people about shifting their language.
mhm.
So, um, I have been in many astrology classes, peer groups, webinars, mentoring groups, and can probably count on one hand the number of people who have used my correct pronouns, even though it's been on the Zoom screen and I've said it out loud every single time. And that is very much the culture of astrology, of mainstream astrology.
Oh, it is.
And I don't know if it's because people don't understand. I don't know if it's because people don't care or they think it's not that important. It's probably some of all of those. Um, but
I've heard some people say, "Oh, it's just not correct grammatically," and I'm going, "Oh, please."
right, which is just not true. And
And language changes all the time
it
anyway.
does. And also Merriam-Webster many years ago recognized they as a gender neutral pronoun for a singular
Mhm,
person.
mhm,
So that's just not true.
mhm,
But I think like being willing to shift your language, using different language, even if it's confusing. I know using they, them pronouns for an individual can be confusing,
mhm.
and it's better to try and mess up than not do it at all,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
which I think is true of all of what we're talking about, is it's
Mhm,
better to try and mess up than not do it at all. And I
mm,
think people get so afraid of messing up that they just don't do it at all.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think those are big things. And then I also think um it's exhausting to particularly, I mean, like just from being one of the only people saying this, kind of shouting into the void, it's exhausting, and it is exhausting on a different level for me as
Mhm,
a non-binary person who is speaking to audiences that I know don't all like respect me as a person or respect my identity. And so when cis people and straight people are willing to have these conversations, it makes it so much easier. Uh,
mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I think being like open and curious and willing to learn are the biggest things. And being willing to like be uncomfortable.
I think there's an element of being willing to challenge a little bit as well, though. I have to tell you a story. I'm not going to mention the person's name, of course, but in my first peer group, which for those who don't know what a peer group is, it's a small group of people moving towards becoming better professional astrologers. I was told that women should wear makeup on Zoom or on YouTube.
Oh my God, I forget that people on the podcast can't see my face. Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm not wearing makeup, anybody, by the way. I don't like wearing makeup.
I haven't worn makeup in 10 years. Oh my God.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're up against.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just, somebody who I guess now identifies as cis. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't care. I don't care what I am. I say. To be honest, I think oh, isn't it time we drop labels one day? I wish.
Yeah.
We're just people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, Della, it's a really real. When I heard you, I was just like, I've got to have her on here. So, where else can people find you? I know you're not big social media. Um,
Yeah, I have too much Scorpio in my chart for
mm,
that. But my website is the best way. So readingsbydella.com. People can schedule there. I do post about classes. I usually teach about twice a year. I'm hoping to run this fall a an astrology 101 course, which I do very often, and then queering astrology for astrologers. I've been building that, which would kind of be a just a longer version of the presentation that you saw,
oh,
Louise.
oh, awesome. Well,
Yeah,
would you send me the link for that when you've
I will.
created it, and I
I
will share
definitely
it
will.
because I don't have time to do it all. And sometimes it's better coming from somebody who's even more directly affected or impacted than I
Yeah,
am. And
yeah,
I am, though, as well, because I have very many non-binary, queer, or trans friends. And,
yeah.
my daughters, they taught me so much. They're in their
Mhm.
late 20s now. And I remember my youngest telling me she was pansexual. And I was like, okay, what's that then, please?
Mhm.
But at least I'm willing to learn. Thank heavens for my
Mhm.
Gemini moon. So,
Mhm.
is there
Yeah.
anything else you'd like to tell people?
Oh, I mean, we could be here for
Oh,
six
I
hours,
know.
but I think that kind of sums it up. Yeah, those are most of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I do know people have short short attention spans,
We
and I
do.
just I just wanted to get you on here to get people thinking about this and to think about which astrologers they work with as well.
Yeah.
You know, if this matters to you, as it should really, but
Mhm.
make sure you're working with astrologers who are aware and mindful of the language they're using and how they speak to people and how they
Definitely.
address people. So,
Definitely.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's a real pleasure to have had you on, Della. Thank you
You too.
very
Thank you
much.
so much.